So the first thing that we ask everyone else is, well, how did you get into the hobby in the first place?
Oh, it was the Warlock of Firetop Mountain for me as a book. I mean, I leading up to gaming, I read fantasy publications, but back then it was we did The Hobbit at school anyway. I think
Yeah.
that must have been the earliest thing when I was still 11, 12. It was one of those books that we all did. And that kind of piqued my imagination. But also, my mum used to take me to the library, the local library, every week to read. And I found, and this is a few years ago, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Yep.
So, and then read all of C.S. Lewis's books all the way through. Then, started with Tolkien, and that kind of fired up my imagination. So it was books initially. It was like the fantasy setting, Le Guin, Ursula Le Guin, all sorts of strange things. Porn of Prophecy, which all of that, the Belgariad,
Hmm.
etc., etc. So
Yep.
it was all of that. And then around when I was just probably a teenager, my dad bought me Warlock of Firetop Mountain,
Hmm.
and a friend of his son had been admitted to hospital for a routine operation, and my dad had bought him that book as a gift for when he was in there, and he thought I would like it, so he bought it for me as well, and that was it. You know, the fact that I could take all of the fantasy that was going on in my head from the books, and then I could read and actually be in an adventure, just that just like fired all the synapses, and I was off.
Hmm.
And then from there, I found Dungeons and Dragons,
Hmm.
and it was I didn't even find it in a shop. Someone gave it to me because obviously I was talking about these ideas of games, etc. And
Yeah.
someone said, "Oh, I think you'd like this," and it was a real beaten up copy of the red basic book.
Hmm.
And again, that just within my imagination and this book fired it all going. We started playing, and just logically, someone then said, "Oh, you can get miniatures." And I had no idea of this at all. No idea of any form of wargaming at all at that point.
Yeah.
But it was all uh kind of came in through the books, through role play, Dungeons and Dragons, and then I bought a dwarf because I went and found this dwarf. Someone told me about a local model store. It wasn't even Games Workshop at that point. It was a local model store that stocked these lead miniatures at the time, and they had fancy miniatures with the puddle bases.
Hmm.
And I found myself in heroic 25 millimeter dwarven scale and bought myself, and off we went. And that was the first miniature I bought. And then because I was playing dwarves, I just started collecting dwarves and got more and more dwarves, and found the early Games Workshop stuff, in the things like the Dwarf King's Court, and I don't know if you remember those, the Dwarf Heroes of Legend, etc. And
Remember those
again,
ones?
still pre-slaughter based stuff.
Yep.
And in the end, my mate, another friend, said, "Oh, you've got an army of dwarves there," and he had no idea to me, and he said you could play Warhammer with that. And it was the same year Warhammer first edition of Warhammer was released.
Yep.
And I can't remember if it was the first edition or the second edition, but they gave away, if you when you bought the game, you wrote off you got a free miniature, but you
Yeah.
had to fill in a card and send it off. And he was a dwarf. It was Thorgrimson. Uh, and so I filled in the card, sent it off, and it was a dwarf, and that was it. I was just totally hooked. That
And
that that was my path in, really.
so back then, did you also paint them, or were you?
No,
No, no. Okay.
not at that point. Uh, yeah, some people did. I mean, we were talking Airfix paints at that time, and obviously, I'd had Airfix toy soldiers because it was a boys, I guess, a boys' present at the time,
Yeah.
where back in the late 70s, early 80s. So I had loads and loads of 172nd Napoleonics and all of that kind of thing. And they I didn't paint any of those either. So I just think it was that collecting gene of toy soldiers that got me going and thinking, oh, it's kind of the same thing, but it's metal, not plastic. It was,
Mhm.
so I don't think at that point it really occurred to me that you could paint them. And it was probably a couple of years after that.
And you didn't even know that you could move them around and roll dice and recreate battles at that
Not
stage.
No, not until Warhammer came along. So it was Warhammer. Warhammer was the first. If we were talking tabletop miniature wargaming, Warhammer was the first thing that I encountered. Uh, I played, and I hadn't realised they were a form of wargaming at the time. I had played the standard hill games, Cry Havoc
Hmm.
and Samurai Blades and Siege. Again, another sort of friend, you see,
Yeah.
introduced at the time with friends because you go out and talk to them, you play games. A friend of mine had Cry Havoc, and I thought it was amazing. So I went to buy it again from the same model shop, and they didn't have it. They were sold out, but they had Samurai Blades,
Hmm.
and I was quite captivated by the Samurai, and I actually preferred the look of. Have you know the games I'm talking about, the little flat die cut
Yeah, yeah. But
pieces on the hex
boxes.
game. So I actually like the cover of the Samurai Blades more and the look of it, etc. And so I bought that one, and I thought, well, he's got Cry Havoc, I've got Samurai Blades. We got two games, and off we go. And I didn't. Like I say, at the time, I hadn't realised they were a form of wargaming. I just thought
Yeah,
they were like a board game. So Warhammer was my way in, but first edition Warhammer. But I don't think I really took it seriously as a real war game until third edition,
yeah.
the orange hardback book, and that was the one that really catapulted it. And we were painting our miniatures at that point, so that was the one that got me going.
And how many people were you playing with back then?
Oh, not many. There was probably a group, the geeky group at school, of course, at the
Yeah.
time. Playing games and all of that stuff was very geeky. So my friends from the computer, club, there was three or four of us, and one of them had a table tennis table in his room and his
In his
bedroom,
room.
yeah, big room, and we used to go and congregate around his house, and that's where we would play. And I think just because we had the table, we had the place to play, it helped us escalate the gaming. There was no clubs at the time, and we were still quite young. We weren't at an age where we could go out and look for wargaming clubs or that kind of thing. And that for me came, a few years later. But at the time, we were just kids, really, and we were just kids trying to play the rules the best way we could.
So in some way, you know, back all those years in the 80s is no different from kids now. It's just maybe the choices are more easy.
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm sure we'll talk about them at some point. I think Games Workshop did a lot of good for wargaming because they put it on the high street or just off the high street because it's
Hmm.
that destination shopping,
Yeah.
and it gave people a place to go and find it. So even if you were on your own and you knew no one else who played, but it was the kind of thing you wanted to do, you could go and find Games Workshop. And back in my time, there was only six, I think, Games Workshops in existence.
Okay.
So in the UK, so as a treat, my dad would take me every summer. And again, this is how I found out about
Yeah.
painting and what you could do with it all, and that there was just more than us. He'd take me to the Sheffield Games Workshop, and I'd go in there and see everything. There'd be all the paint, and you know, they were grumpy back then though. They were grumpy men who ran the stores, so they wouldn't tell you anything. You'd have to work it all out yourself. But just seeing what was on offer and just seeing all the products, opened it all up, I think. So yeah, that and still today, Games Workshop is still a gateway for wargaming in general, I believe.
So are you a country lad in the UK sense rather than an Australian one? So did you grow up in a large town or were you?
Oh right, yeah, no, my dad. Well, yeah, interesting. Yeah, my dad was in the RAF,
Mhm.
so we moved around a lot. So so which was both good and bad. It was bad because obviously I had to leave my group of gamers behind, and only one of the other lads was parents were in the RAF, and so the chap at the table, he was a local lad, so I think they carried on playing, and we moved out, and it took me a while to find more people to play. So how it and lucky again, I was still playing role play. I played lots and lots
Yep.
of Dungeons and Dragons, and everywhere we moved, there was a youth club. So if there was no Dungeons and Dragons or no role play, I would set up a club and I would play it
Yep.
and get people to play. So I still could be in the hobby, but wargaming was a lot more difficult. And I think I was 14, I think, when we found out there were the RAF actually had a wargaming association called
Okay.
RAFWA. And at 14, dependents were allowed to join.
Hmm.
And my dad said, "Look, I think you need to go and do this." And he took me along, and it was all there on the RAF base. And at that point, I first found all these other games. They were all play. None of them were playing Games Workshop. They were all
Yep.
playing historical games. So that's when I realized that it was this thing. There was this big thing that came before.
And
So
how did you find that?
well, they had it.
All
What
the new
finding?
thing,
Finding
you
I,
got it.
I, oh, it just blew my
Yeah.
mind totally in a good way because I liked history, so I
Yeah.
liked from the Airfix Toy Soldiers. I'd read a lot about Napoleonics. Waterloo, the Peninsular War. I'd read a lot about the Barons' War and medieval from Cry Havoc, because Cry Havoc was set. That was the gateway in, and then Samurai. When I owning Samurai blades just was like wow. And then on top of that, with my dad being in the RAF,
Yeah.
I knew everything about fighter planes,
Yeah.
and airplanes, because I could see them taking off, and they were flying around all the time, and I just knew everything about them. I was a bit of an airplane spotter at the time,
Yeah.
up until about the Cold War. So, because that was when I was still a kid and I was still at home. So yeah, just being able to realize at that point that I could go and play games based on history and the things that it really fired my imagination as well, was just mind blowing. So yeah, it's really weird, isn't it? It never occurred to me, at all that you could do that, or that there was people, and maybe that's because there wasn't people around me who were war gamers. My dad wasn't a war gamer, but then I found out the chap who lived two doors down from us, in the quarters,
Yeah.
he worked with my dad. He was a war gamer.
Yeah.
So, but he was an adult, and it was like that kind of period where everybody, it was quite uh, fine for me to go to his house and at 14 and play war games with him, uh, and from there I just absorbed everything. From I think the first game I played with them was a game that someone had written in the club called Jet Noise, and it was all
Okay.
about dogfighting with early jet fighters up to Cold War jet fighters, and that was really interesting. All had height sticks,
Yeah.
and you could climb and bank, and you had to write down in secret what your plane was doing, what you were going to do that turn and where you were, and it was all based on initiative roll. That was very exciting. Uh, to just playing Napoleonics and then start to collect samurai.
Okay.
So
And
yeah, that was.
that stayed with you for quite a while.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, it stayed for me for a long time. Yeah, I even took when I ended up going to boarding school when it got to the pointy end of my education, with my dad being in the forces, so to stop me moving around between schools. And I went to school armed with all my dwarves and everything. I took and I had uh Dungeons and Dragons under one arm, and my school books under the other, and off I went to school, and I took it all with me.
And how was it at school when you turned up with miniatures and
Yeah,
mind games?
yeah, yeah, it still wasn't as universally accepted as it is now. I hid it for about a year under my bed until I kind of got climatized, and then slowly brought out the Dungeons and Dragons first as an idea, and then there were some people who were interested,
Yep.
and we started playing Dungeons and Dragons. We never got any wargaming done, any sort of gaming, but I did loads of painting while I was there.
Not good. So you finished school, and
Yeah.
so you went off to uni, or you did something else, and you did the wargaming fall behind as you got older, or is it stayed there?
No, not at all. I was supposed to go to uni, and I decided that I didn't want to, which probably was a silly. Looking backwards now, it's probably the only thing I regret.
Yeah.
And then I ended up a bit lost. I wasn't sure what I was going to do, and then I ended up moving to Nottingham.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I think I followed a girlfriend to Nottingham. She was at the university there, and ended up there needing a job. And then I saw an advert for Games Workshop, and I was 19 at the time,
Yeah.
and just in the stores to work in the Games Workshop stores. So I went, I applied, I got an interview. I talked about all the Games Workshop miniatures I'd owned and still owned over the years, and they were suitably impressed and gave me a job. So I ended up working as a sales assistant in one of the stores, and there was only still about 20 stores at the time,
Yeah.
and uh, that really just came out. I would say not well, yeah, desperation. I needed a job, and I can't say that I went. I had it. I was focused on going to work for Games Workshop. It was. I think it was just coincidence. I saw it in the back of a white dwarf, applied for the job, and about 6 weeks later ended up working for Games Workshop.
There you go. All that misspent youth, you know, has
Yeah, it
led.
came in handy. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, as I still argue today with my dad, that was what my university education. So because I've stayed, in the business since. I've been working either Games Workshop myself, Warlord, etc. now for over 30 years.
So one of the questions that we ask, and because there's a lot of people in our club, they take rules, and you've got the group that take rules as written, and we'll just play what's in the book, and then you've got others that say,
Yeah.
"Yeah, no, I don't think I quite like it that way, or should be different," and start tinkering. Were you a play by the book, or were you a natural tinkerer when it came to rules?
Uh, ooh, I I I didn't change the rules because I think at the time we were just pleased to find other people to play, and you wanted to play the rules as they were because a lot of the time you were playing against people you didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
You would rock up at a club and you'd want to be playing the right rules. Excuse me. What we When it started tinkering was really as more of having a group of friends to play with.
Yeah.
And it was more about trying to expand on it and make some sort of campaign rules or something around it. Or when we played uh, frequently and we found something that was really overpowered, and then
Mm.
we would dial it back in. But at that point, really really didn't tinker or change the rules as were. I would be more inclined to take a set of rules and apply it to a different setting.
Okay.
And say I want to play, X with this, but there's no rules for X, so let's create X. You know.
And how did that fit within the Games Workshop environment, or you kept your professional life and your hobby life quite separate?
Yeah. No, well, it was. I had a great. You know what? I had a great time. That 4 years, 4 or 5 years in the store. I worked for Games Workshop for about 15 years, all in
Mm-hmm.
all. And the first 4.5 years was in retail. So
Mm-hmm.
I'd worked in the stores, and I worked because I had no ties. I was lucky enough to be able to travel around and work in lots of stores.
Yep.
And I ended up in London, spent a lot of time down in London, ran the Plaza store, ran the Oxford store, and did lots of work. And it was great because I still have friends now, 20, 25 years on, that I made when I was in retail,
Yep.
and they're like my university buddies. I still friends with them, and it was because you were in an environment with people who were gamers and they got it, and they talked the same language, and You'd always get a game. If you wanted a game of something, there was always a game to play, or you wanted to go and drink for a drink and talk about something. And a lot of the time, these guys, although we were sanctioned to play Games Workshop games in store all the time, which was not, which at the time was a good thing, because we're talking about, you know, when I started third edition of War, not third, fifth edition or fourth edition of Warhammer, where they first had the Warhammer and the Battle Magic, and then the first box version of 40k and Man of War, Necromunda, all of these cool games came through. So we were really well serviced for hobby in that sense. But like myself, a lot of the guys who worked for Games Workshop played other games.
Mm-hmm.
Or they were interested in wargaming as a whole. And when I was down in London, the guys introduced me to Salute. The concept that there was a gaming show that wasn't Games Day, again, blew my mind. And I think being in that environment with people at Games Workshop at that time, I think it was a place for people to go who liked wargaming, not just Games Workshop games.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just very fruitful, very fruitful, and I'd found it sounds cliche, but it was like you found your tribe.
Mm-hmm.
They were all there, and like I say, I still game with these people today, and still talk to them today. So that was a massive plus for me with Games Workshop.
I mean, lethal don't like to add it, but I think what's quite different from an Australian context and where we come from gaming is that everyone's gamed as a hobby and has had another life, and they add their gaming as a hobby on top of it. But you've been one of these people who have been involved in the hobby professionally right from a young age, and have still, had the professional and the hobby side,
Yeah,
I'm assuming, happily coexist. Whereas,
yeah,
that's really
yeah.
odd for us. So being in that professional gaming environment and being able to have, how did you manage the professional side of what you were doing, selling games or working in Games Workshop as a business versus still playing as a hobby?
Yeah, at the end of 4 years of teaching kids how to play 40k and Warhammer, it became a bit dry.
Mm-hmm.
So on Necromunda, it did get very difficult. But there was a lot of lessons to learn there. I think what helped me was, I think if there wasn't other opportunities within Games Workshop at that point, I think I may have had to go and find another job outside of the industry. But again, I think luck was very much on my side. Games Workshop they were doing a project which was around their tills in their stores.
Mm-hmm.
And I was quite knowledgeable about the way the tills work, just from being interested in the reporting of it, etc. And I got seconded to head office to do this project with them with IT. They needed a retail body, and they let me go. And just having that opportunity there to do it, and I kind of fitted in there, and I think I realized at that point that kind of thing floated my boat. So at the end of the project, I never left.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up, you could argue that I did have a proper job, because for about 9 years, I worked in their IT department, and Games Workshop trained me. They were excuse me, they were a really good employee for me. They trained me, they sent me out, they put me on IBM courses, all of that kind of stuff. So I learned, I knew all of the hobby and the Games Workshop info. What they did was they fed all the IT stuff into me. So then I ended up, for that period of time, going into their business systems and flying all over the world, helping them put in business systems.
Yeah.
So I had, again, you could argue that was my university again there, and because it was at the time, I don't think it's so much so now, but at the time they were very much rewarding of people with can-do attitude.
Mm-hmm.
So, we need to go and put in a business system in Canada. I'll go, I'll send me, and I'd go to Canada and be there for about 6 months doing that, or come down to Australia, and do some stuff there and into Europe. So again, as away from gaming, as a life experience for me, that was huge. I learned so much about everything. I got to travel the world because of Games Workshop. I got to go and see lots of Games Workshops everywhere. I got to talk to lots of different gamers everywhere, which was great, in different countries. And I think I really grew up at that point. And then came back at the end of there and ran all the IT in their sales for their sales division. So it was a good, again, from the hobby and finding something to do as a hobby, and needing a job, it actually became a job. So at that point it was really good. And because I worked in IT in Games Workshop, I got to go around all of head office and I got to meet everybody. So I got to meet all the guys in the studio. I got to talk to everybody about the business while we were in doing things. So again, I think I learned a lot about running gaming businesses at that point.
And so, if you were to pull out a couple of gems from your memory that you say these things are stuck with you, for whatever reason, it was someone that you met or a game that you played or the dice that you rolled with someone that pants someone, whatever it happened to be. What was it? What immediately springs to mind?
A couple of things. The first one that springs to mind is being lucky enough to work on Beyond the Gates of Antares with Rick
Okay.
Priestley, and actually going to play at Rick's house in his gaming barn. That was a big thing for me. And just having access to Rick, because one of the positives about working at Warlord for me was that Rick was there and he was very giving.
Yeah.
And losing to him, and Rick just being totally surprised that he won because he normally loses. So just having that opportunity, that was a big thing for me.
Okay.
And another thing, not so much gaming, but it sounds really these people were like rock stars to me, like the Perrys, Rick,
Yeah.
Jervis, etc. And working at Lenton in the day when they brought us all together and just going in the restaurant early doors and just having breakfast and they'd be in there. It'd be like, having breakfast with Led Zeppelin, that kind
Yeah.
of thing. That uh, I was quite awestruck. And then meeting the Perrys for the first time properly, and just how open they were and giving, and we got to talking about some Napoleonic stuff, and they were saying, "Oh yeah, right," and then talking to me about it, and then we separated. Then about a week later, through the internal mail, came all of this stuff from them that they'd
Yeah.
actually taken the time to photocopy stuff out of magazines for me and point out all the figures that I needed to buy, and and it was like, wow, and they were just so genuine, and they are still so genuine. They're just lovely guys.
Is that something that people who have been able to transfer their hobby and keep the hobby into a business, do you think that's carried through with other people? Is it
I think so.
it's successful because they're just so enamored and engaged in it, and they just keep doing
I'd like
it?
to think so. I'd like to think so. Ultimately it is a hobby. We are it's toy soldiers and wargaming, isn't it? And I feel very lucky that I've been able to have a career out of it for over 30 years. And I think it would be very churlish of me not to be open and giving back to people. And people have done that for me. So, from that experience. But everybody I've met, has been very helpful. They're all within the industry. They're all very helpful around that. Yes, is the
Yep.
simple answer. I think so. Yeah, I think so. And I think it's I'm struggling to answer it because I think, well, I think a good answer would be, a lot of these people have become my friends,
Yeah.
and they genuinely become friends because we like the hobby,
Yep.
and they make time for you because it's a shared hobby.
Yep.
And someone like Rick is just really genuine and unassuming. So you go and ask a question. He's got a wicked sense of humor, and you go and talk to him. He's funny and he's very, very open. He's very giving. So also people like, Trish, uh,
Yeah.
Cardan of Trish Morrison of old.
Yeah.
We've been doing some work with her. Same thing, just very open, very relaxed about it all, very comfortable in their space and in their skin. And that's really refreshing because I don't think uh, you find that a lot of the time in other industries.
Yeah. Maybe because it is a hobby and it's not a high pressure
Yeah.
sport or the music industry or the corporate side
Yeah.
that goes around. So, why did you leave Games Workshop?
I ooh, I think after 15 years, I just think my time was up.
Yeah.
For me personally, I wasn't playing as much hobby. I think it was becoming very much a job.
Yes.
And I felt as though it was just time to move on. And yeah, it got to that point. And it was all very, you know, fine. I think what facilitated it really for me was it was 2007. And
Mm-hmm.
in 2007, they got to the point where they restructured the business. And what they did was they had two businesses. One was the sale, two sale. They had a sales division and a manufacturing division, and within there they had two operational entities.
Yeah.
And I think they realized they didn't need to have both, and so as a cost saving exercise, they collapsed both into one. And so there was a lot of redundancy around that. So a lot of people went, and and it was all on the table, but at that point, I'd already for about a year thought, I'm just not feeling this anymore. And so I was lucky enough to be able to say, oh, make me redundant. I'll
Yeah.
take redundancy. And and so I left. We shook hands and it was all harmonious and I went. But I had no idea what I was going to do at that point. I'd actually gone and applied for a job as a project manager at a tech company.
Yeah.
So I was going to join the real life world, and that was all fine. And I was on what the downside of it was. I was on 3 months like notice on gardening leave.
Yeah.
So I got to I'd obviously been there 14, 15 years, and I'd worked solidly. And then having 3 months off, I was just kicking my heels. I didn't know
Yeah.
what to do. And then uh, real life was dawning, and my wife and I had gone away on a holiday just before I'd come back, because I was going to come back and start the job, and we were in the pool, and I said, "Oh, I'm not going to take that job," and she was like, "What?" And I said, "I've been thinking about it for 3 months. I'm not going to take the job."
Yeah.
And she said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know. Maybe build some websites or something. I don't know." And it was, it was 2007. This whole Web 2.0
Yeah.
websites, all of that kind of SEO was all the buzz, and I was quite interested in it. So I said, "Oh, I'm going to go and I'm going to set up on my own and do that." And she was like, "Well, okay, if that's what you want to do." And so I was, I had an understanding wife, and I went to set up on my own. And my first client was Warlord Games.
Okay.
And so I didn't even get out of the industry really. I got home. John and Paul, John Stallard and Paul
Yeah.
Sawyer said, "Oh, we know you're not working. Will you come and build me a website kind of thing? We know you can do it." And I went, "Yeah, okay." So right at the beginning uh, of Warlord's life
Yeah.
cycle, I was in there behind the scenes building website for them, and then I just never left, and they ended up employing me. So
In the
I
Lenton
ended
Business
up
Park.
sorry.
In Lenton Business Centre, Business Park, the shared
Yeah,
office.
at the Lenton Centre. Well, I was working from home, and then I ended up being drawn into there. And then I was lucky enough. They said, "Look, we come and help us. You've got lots of skills."
Yeah.
So I said, "Yeah, yeah, that's great." So I ended up doing their web and their direct sales, and lots of other things behind the scenes for about 7 years.
So when did you write Test of Honor, and what was the impetus to actually dive in and do it?
Uh, I was at Warlord.
Yeah,
It was about with Graham Davey. Graham was working on my web team, and you asked about hobbies. I used to do Aikido. So
yeah,
one of the things I did was Aikido for about 15, 16 years. And so did Graham, and we were really, really excited and interested in the Japanese history again from samurai blades. And I just said to Graham one day, wouldn't it be great to play a Kurosawa-esque skirmish game,
mm,
so a samurai skirmish game, not a big battle game, but that kind of real tense, well shot Kurosawa, esque game. And he said, yeah, that would be great. And he was really interested. And between us, we just wrote it for fun.
yeah,
So we did it in the evenings while we were working at Warlord, plenty of opportunity to play. And that's what we did. We just created Test of Honor over about 18 months, I think. And it just changed and grew based on the games we played, and more people from Warlord wanted to play. I got Waspin, excuse me.
oh, yeah,
uh, Wanted to play, and we just got really, really play tested. And then what happened was Warlord uh, acquired War Games Factory, the
yeah,
plastics from War Games Factory, and they knew that we were working. We were not working to create a game to sell, but they knew we'd been playing a samurai game for 18 months, and they said, "Oh, we got these plastics. Do you want to do a game?" And both Graham and I went, "Yeah, that makes sense to
yeah.
me." So, and that's how Test of Honor came about.
So in the case I put beforehand, in this case, it was definitely the game came first, but the miniatures were there. So
Yes, absolutely. The game came first, and it's quite interesting actually, because now what Graham is doing with Test of Honor, with the sets that he's releasing, like the Bandits and the Brigands and that kind of thing, that was more how we saw Test of Honor originally.
yeah,
So, but the game was led by the nose by the plastics, because that was the way that it was able to come to market.
yeah.
Otherwise, the original game wouldn't have looked like that. It would look more like what Graham's doing now with Grey for Now.
I haven't played that there, but I had friends who played Test of Honor originally, and came down and I played it with them a few times. And look, I was just really interested. So, if I was to summarize this, you'd always wanted to play those games, and you just took it on board. Let's just make it happen. So,
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
weren't at Warlord, would you have ever thought of publishing it?
Ooh, probably. I think probably yes is the answer. I think it would have become a game, but it would have been a very different publication. I
Okay.
think we may have gone to Osprey or something like that. The Just being a Warlord facilitated a box set with miniatures, and then also Warlord, it being the version 1 being a Warlord product,
Yep.
enabled it to get out there, because they had a huge connection with trade accounts, and quite a big entity. And I
Yep.
think that facilitated Test of Honor being being so well known, and getting out. I don't know, and I think without that, I'm not sure it would be the same. I think the game has to be good. You can
Yep.
get it enabled it to get out in front of as many people as possible. But if the game was bad,
Yep.
people wouldn't play it. So it's give that's probably given it its longevity. But I think that's how it got its legs and grew. But I think otherwise it would be a rule book, no doubt. It would just be a rule book.
So, yeah, you and Greg have gone and written it, and it's been published.
Hmm.
Like, oh, that's cool. That's okay. Or did they actually start churning around and saying, oh, maybe this is something I could do a little bit more of? Or is that only a
Yeah,
recent?
totally. Totally, yeah. Yes, absolutely that. I didn't consciously think I want to be a games designer. I didn't consciously think that at all. Uh, I I see myself as a hobbyist, and I still do. You
Yeah.
know, I like the hobby, and along same as Test of Honor. You know, if you look at the Barons War or Mortal Gods or Gangs of Rome and all these other things we've done so far, it's because I had an interest in them. I
Mm.
haven't those games that we've created. Uh, it's because I was interested in it and I wanted to play a game or have miniatures for those periods. Uh, so I think maybe I'm a games designer by accident, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think because people are playing the games and they're buying the games and playing the games, it's encouraged me to continue to write and release games. So that's the positive of there. That's how I think I've got to there. But you know, ultimately, I enjoy it.
Yeah.
You know, ultimately, I enjoy it, and I enjoy seeing people playing the games really, and getting you know having fun and really getting a kick out of it.
So, yeah, being at Games Workshop and being part of, I suppose you'd say that the Games Workshop diaspora, you know, how would you categorize all the ex Games Workshop employees in the industry, and what's led to the environment where we are now, where there's so many different games and great games and so many different
Yep.
miniatures and great miniatures, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think Games Workshop has facilitated it initially, and I also think if you look at Games Workshop life cycle, I mean it's 45 years now with some of these people, and they've gone through that mill. And as Games Workshop have grown, recruited, and got bigger, they've obviously had to feed their machine.
Yeah.
So there's more sculptors. They're training sculptors now. They, you know, there's people coming in. They're training games designers. They're showing all these people how to do it. So I think people are coming out the other side of there, and they're realizing as well that the ability to create a game or to sculpt miniatures and the options now that are open to people, it's a lot easier to do it now than it ever has been.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, you know, coupled with people's enthusiasm and knowledge, uh, you know, the uh, the the things that well, I can't think of the right word, but the you know like 3D printing, 3D design, you don't you know all of those kind of things. It's a lot easier to get things to market now. So I think that has exploded. Uh, if you look at you know Mantic, Ronnie
Yep.
Renton, you know, Warlord, John Stallard, Paul, you know, these people are all ex GW people. Nick at North Star,
Yeah.
you know, touched at GW, but he's been in the industry. So I think Games Workshop being in Nottingham and bringing the people in, because I'm not from Nottingham, but I still live near Nottingham now. You know, all of it's that closeness of everybody to be able to create with like-minded. So I think you have that complete melting pot of designers, writers, sculptors, creators.
Yeah.
It's not, you know, you throw a stone, you'll find someone. You know, it's easy to find. If you have a project, it's easy to find the people to work on it.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
it,
yeah.
and it, and it's and it's Games Workshop have trained them, I think.
Yeah.
And I think we'll continue to see more and more of it.
And you think that when people come out and they move into the other part of the gaming world and the hobby, they suddenly realize that there's more that they can do? The creative juices or the strictures that they've worked in are suddenly removed, and
Oh,
they just do it.
yeah, yeah, I think so. I think, you know, it's like you know, everybody says that everybody's got a book in them, everybody's got, you know, something in them. You know, if you take all of those people who have left and you think they've all got a game in them, that's a lot of games, you know. Uh, and there's willing people to publish them.
Yeah.
So, you know, if it's good enough to get out there, it's good enough to be, you know, to get out in front of people.
So you've got a games published of something that you've loved playing. You're working with Warlord.
Yep.
Why did you decide to get into miniatures and go into Footsore?
It was just an opportunity, really. Someone offered myself the UK part of Futsal Miniatures
Yeah,
because it was with
was built
Bill
in the
Foreman.
US. Yeah,
Yeah. So I said yes. I spoke to the guys at Warlord and they were okay with me buying in and taking it. And then I just realized that that was more what I wanted to do. And, naively, I thought I've been in this industry for 30 years. I know everything I need to know. And I
mm,
knew nothing when I took over futsal. Luckily, I partnered with a friend of mine who is, again, ex-Games Workshop, a guy called Mark Farr,
yeah. We and
who,
I've talked a few times. So yeah.
yeah, so luckily, I had someone as a sounding block and we worked our way through it. But it's been a hard slog because we had to really learn on the job.
It's
So,
you mustn't have had it taken on long. And I was on one of my jaunts through the UK, and I stopped in and was chatting with Steve Wood. And I said, "Look,
mm,
I need to get stuff." And he says, "Oh, you can get this Footsore stuff." So I ended up buying the Vikings through him, and he took me through the centre. And I might have bumped into you, I'm not sure, but being in that business centre and having that
yeah,
sort of hub of all the smaller businesses together, was that
yeah,
really helpful? Transforming
massively
Footsore and
so.
taking it.
Massively so. I mean, you mentioned Steve there, Steve Wood. He was a massive lifesaver for us because he used to do all our postage to start with, just simple things where, we had these orders coming in and we were picking them. It's like, what do we do with them now? They've got to go out somehow, and we'd have to take them to the local post office and post them out one by one. So, having people like Steve Wood, Nick Eyre from North Star there as well, they were really helpful. They really schooled us in running an online business,
Yeah.
uh, and that really helped. But yeah, we're not, funny enough, we're not there anymore. We've actually moved. We've got 2 units somewhere else, and it's really grown over the last 7 or 8 years. And it's been an interesting journey.
Well, it has grown significantly because you've got more sculptors involved, and you've had the Kickstarters, and you've been producing
Yeah.
your own books. So, yeah, what was the plan? Or did you have a plan and it's suddenly, or was it just you're flying by the seat of your pants and
Yeah, Mark. Yeah, Mark tells me off constantly, at least once a year. We went for a walk up in the Peak District. This was how we ended up buying Footsore, and we were walking, and I said, "Oh, I've been offered Footsore miniatures. Do you want to come in?" And in the end, he just had a bonus, and he didn't know what to do with it. So between us, we bought it. And that was our entire plan at that time. And the irony of it all is, I'm a project manager. That's what I was trained to do, and I plan to the infinite all the time. But then we went in, and I just thought it's just selling toy soldiers, isn't it? Both of us, both of us knew how to cast. We thought, well, we cast them up, put them in a box, send them out. How difficult could it be? And that was the plan. And then we realized quite quickly that we needed a better plan. And so we thought we need to write a game to sell our soldiers, is what
okay,
our toy soldiers. That's what we thought. So we had this discussion around it, and then one of the chaps who we employed, a guy called Darren Evans, said, "Oh, I've got this game," and this was Gangs of Rome,
yeah,
and he'd been playing this Roman gang fighting game, a la Necromunda-esque Mordheim type thing, and obviously we couldn't release that because it was Necromunda, but we're Romans. So we did Gangs of Rome as our first game, and it went really well. But again, it just shows you how the level of our planning at the point was. We didn't make any Roman miniatures. We had to make an entire range to go with it.
yeah,
So it didn't help at all. Luckily, we had Sarissa who helped us by creating all of their Roman buildings.
yeah,
But that is the naivety of it. And we're still, so we did that. We've had Mortal Gods. We've done Baron's War. But the reality is that Footsore Miniatures is a Dark Age business
yeah,
originally. and it was Dark Age miniatures, or early medieval as we call it these days. As you said, Lorne, you came and bought Vikings. Where's our Dark Age rules?
Well,
And
I-
Mark says this to me every single time I go and see him. Where's the Dark Age rules? Because reality, the thing that makes the most sense is we should have written a Dark Age game to sell all our Dark Age miniatures. And yeah, we still made it really hard for ourselves, to get to this point.
so because we know other, we're friends with Nick Robson down at Eureka because he supports the club and we do stuff there. Of course, he just produces miniatures, but then we know the other who do the games. Do you need to have miniatures in games to be successful, or do you just need to have miniatures that everyone wants to use in your game, in their games?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? I believe you need rules to sell miniatures, is what I believe. However, if you're in a historical environment, you can argue that you could use anybody's miniatures to play those games. So then what you need to do is create miniatures that people want to buy. You need to create the best historical miniatures for people to buy. I don't agree where you should shut the door on other manufacturers. So you create a rule set and you say to people you can't use any other people's miniatures, because that's a really easy way of controlling, being the gatekeeper. The way you should control that situation is by saying we create the best miniatures for this game and you want people to buy them. But in my experience, and people may say different, I believe, and from experience, rules sell miniatures.
And so I suppose
you'll always sell miniatures, but people will buy them for a game.
We've got our little show. We're trying to make it bigger, victorious, etc. And we've got the Roman reenactor group coming around to dress up. And when it's raining, like today, they go and play games. So they play Hail Caesar, but they've one of the guys who's a historian and he's got a supplement that's in the Warlord publishing area, so he wants to play SQPR.
Yeah.
Never played it. So I'm interested to see what goes on there, because we play Infamy or other battles, etc. And the question is, how many people write games because they just think they need a game for their miniature range? And do they do a really good job? Sorry. Or sorry.
I can edit that out.
Yeah, you can edit that one out. Very good, thank you. So is it, look, we've got these miniatures we want to sell, we better put a game out so they play our game rather than someone else's. Versus...
How many are you asking? Are you asking, is that what we do, or do people do that? In my experience, that's two different
I don't
questions.
think you do that.
Do I believe people do that? Yeah. Yes, I do. I do believe that. I personally, I don't see the point of that. I think you should create games you're passionate about, because I think it comes through. And I think if you're not, I think it's very difficult to hide it.
So, Baron's War, obviously, great in playtesting. It did the Kickstarter with the miniatures and the books, etc., and it's gone out. And we play it in the club, and we're trying to get some more people on it, making a table for the show to demonstrate it out there. Was that Mark saying it's about time you went and wrote something so we've got the miniatures? Goes back to where you were when we were a little lad and the paper counters.
Yeah, it's a very different story. I wanted some Baron's War miniatures personally, and Mark was like, "Yeah, we'll do the Baron's War. We'll do the Baron's War. It's okay." And bearing in mind, we're talking, it's about 5 years ago now, so we're still early days. We'd only had Footsore for a couple of years at that point, so we were still trying to get our feet under the table. We'd created 2 big games, as in Gangs of Rome and Mortal Gods, which took a lot of cost. And Mortal Gods nearly ruined us as a business, because we
had the wrong name to start off with, with War Banner.
Yeah, that's another story. Yes, yeah. Thanks, Games Workshop. But I wanted some Baron's War miniatures, is what I wanted, and Mark said yes. but we never got to it because we never had the budget. So in the end, I was like, right, I'm going to do this myself. I'm going to make this happen. So we'd never intended to do a Kickstarter or anything ever, you know, with anything. And I thought, well, I could kickstart a small range of Barons Wall miniatures on my own, you know, away from Footsore, and Footsore could make them, etc. You know, and take the risk away. And I knew Paul Hicks from my days of working in London, down at the Plaza, and you know, known him about 20 odd years. So I just contacted him and said, look, I want to do some Barons Wall miniatures. I can't pay you. He was like, right, what? I said, I can't pay you because I haven't got any money. Would you want to take the risk with me? And he was like, go on then. And he made them, and it, you know, as we know, it was quite successful. And so the whole intention of the Barons Wall was just to make some Barons Wall miniatures. So that first Kickstarter was going to be it. We'd released them as a range. I could pay Paul, and that was it. But people just went nuts for it. And then we ended up with lockdown in the UK. The second one came around the same time as COVID, and I was locked down at home, and it was just like the perfect opportunity to write some rules, and it kind of all just kind of segued from there.
So Barons War plays quite differently from a lot of skirmish games, and it's great. We love it behind that. So when you were writing the rules or thinking about writing the rules, did you have a firm idea as to the type of game you wanted it to be? So can you take us through your thought processes there?
Yeah, I wanted it. I'm very much a narrative gamer. I like to have a story to tell. So I not so much here, you know, we call Warhammer Hero Hammer, and the heroes win the day. And I wanted to try and take this idea at the time that most skirmishes around that period were quite small. They were like border disputes or tax disputes, that kind of thing. So the game had to have a small number of knights because not many would be there, some trained soldiers and the rabble that they would drag with them. But I wanted it to be that you could write a narrative story with the way that you played with those different types of troops. So that was the idea, and that's how I came up with the idea for the way that the activations worked. So 9 times out of 10, if you've got knights and knights are activating and they're going to charge or fight the other guys, they're probably going to win because they're just so much better than the rest. However, if you've got, I wanted the levy or the very green or irregular troops to have a chance. So this is how you know, with the way that you'd activate or the way that you'd react, so they would also get a chance to fight back, and a story could be written. So that's the kind of idea that we wanted to create with it all.
Okay, and you know, we find it it's a very brutal game. It's lovely. You set it up, and actually you can be in action in the first turn. There's no pussyfooting around. It's you're constantly thinking what you're going on. Your green bowmen have a tendency. One of the guys I play with is very good at rolling 10s.
Yeah.
So my knights disappear. So yeah, were there any particular mechanics that you were looking at? You're saying, look, this is what makes the game unique, or I want to try and put this in there that no one else has done, or it's just
the morale factor. I like to put something into every game that is unique to that game. I mean, because when you write a game, there's always you know, all the movement, shooting, hand to hand, all of those different elements. You know, however you bake them into a game, it's all the same. Because that's the pure nature of a tabletop game. So if you were going to start to write a game, you could actually put those sections in a book straight away. You just need to fill them in however you want to play. But what I wanted it to try and add some sort of troop management around morale, and not you've got to this place, roll the dice, you're running off. So morale does affect combat. It affects, you know, it can affect all your dice rolls, and it can change the quality of your troops. So, you know, even on a good day, if your morale is low, you know, you're not going to perform as well as you can. And that's hopefully what that shows within the game. And it was all around that morale.
And the weary mechanic. So what was your what was your inspiration around that?
Yes, with the way that the actions work.
Yeah.
So you could multi-step. What we were finding when we were playtesting was if you positioned your units in particular ways with orders, if you didn't have some way to limit multiple orders, they could become killing machines quite quickly. So the idea behind the weary mechanic was to try and, you know, the more you act, you know, the more you do, the tireder you become, but also it's to penalize multi-actions.
Yep. So that's good. And, you know, you've obviously, I suppose, you did it as an A6 book.
Yes.
Yeah, a bit smaller, which is good and bad. It's for my. I think if you did it on a big side with large print, it'd be easier for people to use in the game. But
if I could have my time again,
yeah.
there's some things I would do very differently with the Baron's War, as in the way that it's produced. So it is, you know, something to think about, especially also just the artwork in it that Peter's done. Peter Dennis's artwork, you know, I think it deserves to be on a big book. So yes, it was. Yes, it was a good idea. Probably not executed as well as I could have executed it, I think.
But this is the first time that you were releasing rules as a rule book rather than as something else.
Yes.
So is there a second edition, a second print run, or something like that that's coming through?
Maybe. You know, it's been played now for 4 years, I think, 3 or 4 years, and the FAQ is getting quite big, so we are looking at certain things. I'm not one of these people who wants to just every few years release a new version. I think all rules need renewing at some point. And going back to one of your earlier questions, where you were saying about tinkering with rules that other people's rules, we play Baron's War in my gaming group, which is a lot of the guys at Footsore, etc. We have some house rules that have evolved that are different to what's in the rule book now. Because that's feedback from players and ways that we've played that, you know, I think at some point that would become a version 2, but I don't know when at this point.
Don't know.
Well, what interestingly, what you said earlier about green bowmen, we don't allow green troops to cause criticals anymore.
Yeah, well, I think that's a good house rule. Maybe I'll test that one out.
So there's certain things that we do, and some of these have found their way into the latest FAQ. So it starts, and it's like anything, isn't it? The more that other people see it and they play the game from how they think it should be, makes you see a game in a different way. Because one of the hardest things I find about writing a game is getting what's in your head, what you understand, and what you've written as playtesting notes into a rule book that anybody can understand. You know, where
they have their own games and their own meta and the friends they play with, and so bring their own slant to it, which you
absolutely
may not have even considered.
Absolutely, you're trying to get rid of all vagaries in a way that you're not, but also not being condescending with it, because you know it's pitching it right. I think a really good rule book would be an instruction manual, you know, to something where it's just dry. Absolutely dry, and then you could have all of the nice background stuff afterwards.
What I liked was the fact that you could flow chart it, so I went and flow charted my own on that, because again it just sees a series of steps, and it's a good thing to be able to remember, because like any book, trying to flick through and find the stuff is sometimes a bit tricky. But you had the soft cover A6, and then you've done PDFs, which is great if you're in Australia because it's easier to get the PDF, but it's
Yeah.
actually cheaper to buy a printed book than to try and get it printed locally.
Yes.
So is there any plans to, well, as the game got to the stage where you can look at printing more, or if you went to do a second edition, would you do like a Bill Hooks Deluxe, which combined everything together?
I think, yeah, I think so. Again, you know, we've just redone Gangs of Rome into an A4 hardback book,
Yep.
and I think it's probably as a rule book, and not the rules itself, but in the way that the rule book has come out and the way it looks and everything, we've probably moved us forwards in our production quality and the way that we would like to do things. At some point, I would like to do that with Baron's War, I think.
Okay, good. Well, we've hit our hour.
Okay.
No, it's been really quick, but Leith, John, you've sat there very quiet and listening. Have you got any questions or things you'd like to ask Andy?
Yeah, just what are you working on next, or what's any sort of, you know, future plans? Something wacky or interesting, or, you know, that you wanted to do?
Yeah, I'm working. Well, I'm doing the first real commission project. So I'm working with another company on a sci-fi game at the moment.
All right.
Okay.
So that's not something I personally would have done. So yeah, I'm quite looking forward to that. That's something I'm working on at the moment. And also we're doing a fantasy version of Baron's War.
Oh,
So
nice.
So what we're going to do first is we're going to put our toe, because going back to the beginning conversation, fantasy has always been my real love. Not that I don't love the other things, but so we're going to do a campaign supplement for the Baron's War, and it's going to be with orcs and elves, but it'll have other army lists in the back so people can try it, and we'll see if there's any desire for it, and if there is, we'll move it forwards and do a full book, I think.
Yeah,
nice.
And then you Footsore Orcs and Footsore Elves.
Well, they're going to be Hobday and Hicks.
Hobday, have the Hobday and Hicks.
Yeah, we Paul and I are going to set up our own web. I mean, obviously, Footsore are going to do all the heavy lifting for us. They're going to do the molding and the casting, but we're creating an entity on its own. So Paul can actually sculpt his own figures and have his own site is the idea. It's me giving something.
Marketing and distribution.
That's absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
And I see that on here you've got a D10. What's your fascination with D10s? Because there's someone else in this room who's got a fascination with D10s.
I just like it because it allows you to do percentages. So yeah, if I have a choice of dice that I want to use for a game, I'd use D10s, because it's so easy to scale it either way, or you know, it makes sense to me. If you need a 4 or more, it's 60% chance, isn't it? So
yeah, that's
so
right.
Yeah. And just on the side, because John and I were talking about this last night, what is the perfect morale factor on a D10 for an elite troop versus a rabble tribesman?
Well, it depends. It depends, doesn't it? At what stage of the battle you're at, doesn't it? If it's early doors, I'd say they're pretty high. I'd give them 80-90%. But depending on what's going on around them, I don't think it'd slip too far, but I don't think it'd go below, 6+.
Yeah, very good. Very good. We've been working too hard, I think.
It's been a long few weeks.
It has. Look, Andy, it's been great to talk to you. Thank you very much for taking your time on a Saturday morning, and I hope we haven't been too invasive on your history, but it's been really, really interesting. And you got any plans to come down to Australia at some time in the future?
Yeah, I think so. Funny enough, I used to come a lot to Melbourne when my Aikido teacher's in Thornbury.
Okay.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
So I used to come and live in his dojo for months at end and come and learn. But that's before I had kids.
Yeah.
So
BC.
I have a real fondness for Melbourne. Real fondness. I would quite happily live there.
Well, we do. So
maybe not today, where it's been 11 degrees and raining, and it's going to be
Yeah.
a bit frigid this week. But it's okay. Well, look, if you're ever going to have a plan to come down here, we'd love to have you at the club.
I'd love to come.
Have another opportunity to chat. Our club is very eclectic in the number of games that we play. We probably, I think every time we have a meeting, there is no double ups of games.
Oh, brilliant.
So there's everything from different historical, Napoleonic and ancients through to even Battletech and stuff. Nowadays, jet age and flying aircraft around is quite popular. So pretty much all in sundry. And the guys are very keen to play different games and explore stuff. So we'll get a little bit more Barons War happening, and I'll send you some photos of the table and the demonstrations that we're doing in August at the show. And
awesome.
Yeah,
I'll send you some things down as well.
Oh, thank you.
Well,
Yeah,
that'd be incredibly generous of you. Thank you so much.
Very good.
Yeah,
well, and thank you very much. Say hi to Mark when you next see him, and
I will do.
Maybe we'll have the opportunity to have a chat again in the future.
That'd be great. Thank you, guys. Thank you for inviting me.
All right, thank you. It was fantastic. Thanks, Andy.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you very much.